Imagine a cold morning in a hidden village deep in the heart of Minas, the kind of place where everyone knows you by name. Lucas, used to the clamor of courtrooms and the weight of his own secrets, steps off the bus with nothing but a battered suitcase and a lost look on his face. He tries to slip by unnoticed, but it's impossible. Right away, Aurora bursts onto the scene, full of life, surrounded by the vibrant flowers of her small shop. She offers him coffee and a smile, that sort of kindness that feels simple but has the power to shatter any armor. But Lucas, still on the run from dangers left behind, answers with distance and silence. And you can feel the tension, two worlds colliding, each trying to guard its own scars. When Aurora happens to witness a young woman from the village being threatened, Lucas can't help himself. Without thinking, he reveals the instinct of someone who's always fought for justice. Now, Aurora is suspicious. Who is this stranger, really? Will he put himself in danger again? And how far can the two of them go, trying to run from the past while fate keeps pushing them together? Stick around. This story is just beginning, and you won't want to miss how this unlikely romance blooms, even among thorns. There are things only a small town can show you, and it's not always what you expect to find. That morning, the sky still seemed undecided, whether it should clear or drop more rain. It was a silence flavored with damp earth, the kind that exists only after a storm. People closing creaking wooden doors, dogs barking at the gates, birds shaking the last water from the wires. And there he was, Lucas, alone, clutching his suitcase, the old kind, that always seemed to carry a heavier load than just clothes. No one stared straight at him, but everyone looked. The village was made of these tiny details that don't escape the eyes of those who live there. As soon as he stumbled off the bus, awkward and unsure, he paused a moment, nearly invisible, as if he wanted nothing more than to pass through without a trace. His hair, still glued to his forehead from the rain. His face closed off. You could feel that barrier from a distance. It wasn't just against strangers, but against everything. Aurora spotted him first through the fogged-up Florist window. From afar, she only saw a tall man who simply didn't belong among all those colors and scents. The glass was misty, the street empty, and still he looked like a lost stranger in the middle of nowhere. She caught herself staring. She hadn't been expecting anyone new at that hour, not anyone wrapped in so much silence. He walked with fear. That's what Aurora noticed, not the fear of someone afraid they'll get robbed, but the kind you see in someone who wants never to be noticed again. A heaviness in the shoulders, as if he was fighting a war inside his own body. Aurora, so used to people full of hurry or anger, noticed something different in him. This sadness wasn't noisy. It ran deep, drained of color, like a wilted flower forgotten in a corner. People in the village pretended not to notice, but the truth was something else. The baker whispered quietly to the egg woman. The bar owner wiped down his counter longer than usual, just for an excuse to spy out the window. Kids looked on, raw curiosity in their eyes, but kept their distance. A few men in the square lowered their voices, watching Lucas as if weighing what kind of trouble he might bring. The funny thing was, Lucas felt as if every cobblestone on that street was screaming his name. He'd run from the city thinking he'd just blend in here. But you can't fool fear, not with your body. He was exhausted. Ever since that accusation, every night had been the same. Hearing footsteps that weren't there, reading threatening messages, falling asleep with his soul on edge. He hadn't come to live, only to disappear. That's why, when he caught Aurora's eyes, he felt even colder. He imagined 1,000 questions blazing in hers, even from across the street. But there was something else, too. A warmth so impossible in that foggy morning it made him ashamed. He wanted no contact, even less kindness. Just silence. Aurora, in that second, felt something too. As much as she tried not to, she remembered herself, a few years earlier, when she felt trapped in a life that wasn't really hers either. She'd learned how to read masked sadness because she carried similar scars. Maybe that's why she didn't look away. She wanted to understand, maybe to help, or maybe just couldn't stand to ignore another lonely soul. Sensing the invisible circle tightening around him, Lucas hurried to the little house where he'd be staying. The borrowed umbrella never even opened right. The latch stuck, his hands shaking from the winter cold that had just arrived. His shoes sank into mud, water splashing up at the cuffs of his dress pants, which, here, looked almost alien. He checked both sides, avoiding any smile, any attempt at conversation. Deep down, he wished he could become just a shadow. He opened the inn door with the key already in hand, as if afraid to disturb anyone. Donna Selena, the owner, tried to make conversation, asked if he was from far away, if he needed some coffee. Lucas replied quickly, monosyllabic, eyes on the floor. She noticed, let out a, if you need anything, I'll be in the kitchen, but knew she wouldn't hear a request. The room was simple, the smell of wet wood, clean sheets. Alone inside, Lucas wondered if he'd made the right choice. The chill in his back was more than just wind from the mountains. It was made of uncertainty. He thought of his old life, courthouse corridors, pressed clothes, stern face before the judges. Now, he had nothing but the rain's voice at the window and a pile of questions he refused to answer. Across the street, Aurora spent longer looking at that closed door than she cared to admit. She was afraid of getting involved, but it was in her nature to care. She couldn't help wondering what had brought that man here, all alone, without hurry, not even a stray smile. She tried to convince herself it was best not to meddle. She didn't want more mystery in her life. But even so, she put together a small bouquet of sunflowers. Couldn't have explained why, except she always did that when she felt someone needed a bit of color. Gradually, things returned to normal in the village. But it was clear something had shifted. Now the glances bounced between curiosity and warning. Lucas saw everything through the crack in his window. Outside, the weather looked like it might clear, but inside him the storm was nowhere near over. Funny how, sometimes, silence cries for help without making a sound. Lucas didn't cry, didn't ask for anything, didn't show anger. Just that dull look of someone devoured by a story nobody here could ever really understand. Before locking up her shop, Aurora glanced once more at his window. And deep down, maybe she thought, it's too early to tell, but maybe something new is waiting to happen here, for her or for him. That morning, each fought their own battle in silence. Both knew how hard it was to trust again. But some sadness calls to another by its scent, by its color, by what's missing. By day's end, the village had given its welcome, with the biting wind, with the soft murmurs, with the uneasiness of those who sense that some huge secret has just arrived, suitcase and heavy heart in hand. That night, there was barely a sound left in the village. Just the click of the florist's key and the muffled patter of fine rain starting up again. Lucas hurried through the doorway. He wasn't there to chat or shop, just to cut through the narrow passage between the counter and the shelves. He didn't look, lost in his own world, wondering if the false story he'd told at the bar earlier had been convincing. That's when he tripped over a pot on the floor, stepping without looking. The sound, dry and quick, of breaking clay cut through the silence. A heap of chrysanthemums tumbled down, scattering soil and petals everywhere. Aurora appeared from the back, wiping sweat from her forehead with a dirt-stained sleeve. She paused when she saw the mess. She stood like that a second, surprised and tired at once. But then she let that smile slip. Real, not forced, not the kind you use to sell things, but the kind that tries to smooth over the awkwardness in the air. Everyone knocks things over, right? She said, crouching down to gather the flowers. There was lightness in her voice, but also an invitation, as if to say it's okay, just don't run away now. Lucas stood still, feeling his face flush. He opened his mouth to apologize, but it came out rougher than he meant. Sorry, I didn't mean to, he said, his tone clipped and almost cold. He didn't look at Aurora. He picked up 2 stems from the floor, awkward, bent, wishing he could vanish right then. Inside, it was different. He felt embarrassed, of course, but also something odd, as if her gestures poked at a part of him he thought had been long broken and shut down. Lucas wanted to leave quickly, but her gaze stayed hooked on his for a moment, and it hurt. The silence hung there, heavy as a damp sheet. Not too heavy, not too light. Just there. You could feel it in your chest, in that kind of pause where life holds its breath before the next step. Aurora noticed. She was sitting on the floor now, dirt-smudged hand passing through the white petals. Do you like chrysanthemums? She asked softly, not looking at him. Lucas didn't answer. He didn't even know what to say. He couldn't remember the last time someone cared if he liked anything at all. His fingers trembled a little. He wanted to ask how she carried on with the world, having heard the stories at the bar, but thought better of it and kept quiet. Aurora got up. She grabbed another pot, not as pretty but still intact, and offered it to him, holding it out firmly at chest height. Here, for luck. It's not everyday life turns a stumble into flowers. Go on, take it. There was a certain lightness and stubbornness in her, like someone daring you to turn down kindness, someone who reaches out and won't take no for an answer. Lucas hesitated. He pretended to inspect the pot, but really just wanted to refuse, avoid favors, dodge new bonds. The fake name on the tip of his tongue, he nearly let it slip, but swallowed it back. When he finally took the pot, his fingers brushed hers, just a little. The shock was barely there, but it crept from his fingers up his arm, landed in his throat, squeezing something old and almost forgotten. He saw the dirt under her nails, mixed with the bright colors of flowers stuck to her apron. What a contrast to his old world. Sterile glass tables, contracts, luxury, perfect suits. Thank you, he said, quieter this time. The silence returned, but it was different now. You could feel a conversation in their eyes. Aurora looked at him, searching, not invasive, but curious. She wondered, who is this man, really, who arrives alone, without a surname or story, trying to disappear among so many flowers? Why all that pain drawn in the line of his jaw, in the awkward way he holds the flower, as if everything scorches his palm? Lucas looked around the shop. Hand-painted pots, the scent of wet soil rising from the cracked floor. It was as if the whole place screamed the opposite of what he was used to. No room here for masks. The warm gaze of Aurora made him uneasy and, at the same time, made him want to stay. A tiny, improbable refuge, but giving up loneliness still seemed scarier. He wanted to ask her about her life, but didn't know how. It was strange. Lucas was a pro at interrogating criminals, unraveling lies with sharp, delicate questions, and yet with this florist, he didn't dare even ask her real name. So he just stayed quiet. Aurora, already standing, wiped her hands on her apron. If you want to come by tomorrow, there's coffee early, she said, no pressure. Sometimes it helps to forget your problems for a bit. He felt the invitation sink in slowly. He wanted to refuse, by reflex, for his own protection. But he cradled the pot to his chest, as if that small gift might be a shield, or maybe a thread pulling him out of whatever hole he'd buried himself in. Lucas hurried out holding the pot, his steps quick on the dirt street. The rain had stopped, but the smell of wet earth followed him home. Inside, he set the flowers by the window latch, stood there, looking at them, trying to understand why this hurt and, at the same time, brought warmth. Throughout the village, the lights switched off, one by one. Across the way, Aurora lingered in the doorway of her closed flower shop, still holding a broken petal. Her eyes wandered far off, trying to figure out if that stranger was just another dangerous secret, or if maybe, for real, there was someone wanting a new start. Deep down, nobody slept well that night. She, thinking of names she'd rather forget. He, trying not to remember who he was. Both of them, without knowing it, already feeling that something, right there, had started to change. No one in the village says anything, but everyone talks, one way or another. Lucas picks up fast how people change their routes when he passes, like there's something wrong with the air around him. He also notices that, at SEU Joaquim's general store, the old owner, everyone greets each other before ordering anything. Good morning, SEU Joaquim. How are you, Dona Marta? The voices are always bright, but dry up the moment Lucas walks in. Even the rustle of bags gets quieter. He tries to blend in, picks up a bag of rice, some cookies, coffee. He counts out his money carefully, sets it down on the counter, but knows no one here trusts him enough for store credit. Joaquim doesn't even offer. He just watches, counts the change slowly, waiting for Lucas to slip up somehow. In the square, the feeling of not belonging is stronger. A cement bench, old trees, branches shuddering in the cold morning wind. Children are playing on the far side, but stop running if they get too close. Lucas finds this odd. He'd never cared much for kids, but now he misses their noise, their simple way of trusting strangers. The silence presses heavier than even the loudest yelling. He tries to keep his eyes on the ground, avoiding everyone's gaze. And there's Aurora. Sometimes he walks past the flower shop just to see the pop of color against the gray, cloudy day. Aurora is always there, working with pots, trimming leaves, explaining something to a customer. Or maybe, when she sees Lucas coming, she hurries to neaten her hair, wipes her hands on her apron, as if to be ready for him. A bright smile, eyes searching for conversation. She always says something silly, a too cheerful, "Good morning, sir," or points out a new flower. Lucas responds with a tiny nod, a scratchy, almost guilty, "Thank you." He knows he's hurting her with his distant ways. He can see that quick flicker of frustration on her face, the effort she makes not to show she's stung. She pretends not to mind, but Lucas sees. While he fakes picking out a flower or just walks past without stopping, he feels the weight of not being able to get close to anyone. At night, the cold in his tiny room is a different punishment. The walls are thin, and the wind rattles the window. Outside, the distant bark of a dog, a cow lowing from someone's barn. Lucas lies on his side, staring at the ceiling, feeling a stab of loneliness in his chest. He thought running would be tiring, but he never expected this new kind of isolation, the kind where you miss something you can't even name. Sometimes his thoughts drift to the past, that life where you couldn't walk down the street without someone shouting your name. Folks always starting conversations, praising, asking favors. So many faces, so many voices, none of them really worth remembering. Now, this absence echoes strangely inside him. He wonders if he can stand much longer as this nobody. And he feels lonelier than ever. At breakfast, Lucas notices how even the bakery's sounds have changed. The warm bread is the same, but Donna Teresa stops asking how he's doing, doesn't offer him fresh coffee. She just serves him, that's it, as if his presence alone sours everyone else's appetite. Two old men whisper by the door. When he looks, their voices stop. He tries to guess what they think of him. He's heard worse from other customers back in Sao Paulo. It's different here. What hurts is the way people look, how they shrink away, as if he carried some invisible disease. Aurora doesn't give up easily. Late one afternoon, when the sky's about to give in to rain, she shows up at the inn door with a small orchid wrapped in newspaper. She laughs, in her slightly awkward way, says she thought the flower was so rare and solitary, it reminded her of him, as if it's just a joke. Lucas takes the flower carefully, trying not to touch her hand, but Aurora doesn't flinch. He feels the warmth in her gesture, as if the tips of her fingers are burning. Inside, he's torn, afraid to get involved, wanting to thank her properly, and silently angry with himself for not being able to open up. She waits for a reaction. Lucas only says, "Thanks," his voice sounding more like an apology. Afterwards, he's ashamed, not knowing how to handle simple kindness. Aurora looks him straight in the eyes, trying to decipher him, but doesn't ask anything. Just smiles, steps back, and before leaving, says, "If you ever want to talk, I'll be there, taking care of my plants." Lucas closes the door slowly, trying to figure out why accepting company is so hard. He drops the orchid on the table and feels the room shrink, the cold closing in tighter. In the middle of the night, he finds himself wondering what really keeps him from trying, truly trying, to put down roots. It isn't just the dangers out there. It isn't only fear of the past catching up. It's how he's grown used to loneliness, as if it's a protective shell. The village stays closed up, suspicious. No one invites him for lunch. No one calls him to chat in the square. But Aurora leaves a crack open. Among all the locked doors, her flowers keep seeping into the air. Deep down, Lucas realizes, hiding is lonelier than he ever imagined. The smell of corn roasting on the stove was the first thing Lucas noticed when he opened the inn window that morning. It drifted in along with a few out-of-tune chords echoing from the village hall. Festa Junina. Aurora had been talking about it all week. He'd pretended not to listen, changed the subject, or buried himself in old books he hadn't the slightest interest in reading. Truth was, just thinking about being in a crowd, with all those eyes boring into him, made his palms sweat. In town, nobody stopped talking about him. The outsider, the stranger, the mysterious man in room 3 of Donna Anita's inn. Lucas felt like a spotlight was on him every time he set foot outside. He knew every step, every curt response, only fed the rumors. Only Aurora seemed immune to it. In fact, she was always coming up with reasons to cross his path. At the gas station, at the market, in the flower shop. She came up with a bright smile, that bold way of hers, as if she refused to believe in walls. By afternoon, the town was decked out, colorful flags fluttering, the overcast sky making everything more vivid. Kids running wild in calico dresses, the sweet smell of canjica in the air. And Lucas, holed up in his room, clean shirt laid out on the bed, trying to make the hours pass. A knock at the door. 3 times. He knew who it was before he even opened up. "You're not really going to stay up here, are you, Lucas?" Aurora barged in without waiting for an answer, holding a straw hat way too small for her hair. He tried to argue, but she was already pulling a scarf from her bag, tying it around her hair, bringing with it scents of lavender and earth. Her gaze was steady, bright, unrelenting, a certain kind of happiness that just won't give up, even when it's been hurt. Lucas dropped his eyes. He didn't want to let himself get caught by it. But Aurora was relentless in the gentlest way. Too much color for him, in a life made of grays. "Just for a little while, come on. Everybody's downstairs, even Donna Anita. If you don't show, people will talk even more." She was right. He was already the talk of the town. Maybe, hidden in the crowd, he'd go unnoticed. Maybe. He put on the clean shirt, ran a nervous hand through his hair. In the mirror, he saw the dark circles, a face too worn for his age. He hadn't always looked like this. Sao Paulo left its marks, but so did fear. When Aurora took his arm, he felt a sudden warmth. Not physical, a warmth in the way she touched him, uninvited, as if she knew his pain even without his stories. They went down together. The hall was loud, but somehow Lucas noticed there, laughter was as common as the silence he carried inside. People pressed close together, danced, swapped recipes, pretended not to notice him but glanced out the corner of their eyes. Aurora pulled him to the center. He hesitated. She insisted. Under so many little lights, time seemed different. Lucas looked around for an exit, but Aurora was spinning, laughing. She looked at him, held out her hand. Just for a second, he almost said no. His body rigid, memories screaming. "You don't belong. You can't blend in. You don't deserve any lightness." But her hand was there, waiting. That gaze. There was something wordless in it. "Trust me." And he did. The music got louder. A messy country dance. People tripping over themselves, laughing at their own missteps. Aurora spun, tried to teach Lucas the steps. He got it wrong. Stepped on her foot. Blushed. "Relax. Everybody learns by tripping," she whispered, so close Lucas felt the warmth of her words on his cheek. He laughed, half nervous, half relieved. It startled him, hearing his own laugh after so long. Around them, nobody seemed to notice this private, tiny revolution. But for Lucas, it was nothing short of a miracle. A coldness inside him was starting to crack, little by little. The smell of popcorn, simple music, Aurora's hand clutching his, refusing to let go. The other voices faded. All of a sudden, shame started to melt into something else. A warmth in his chest, a wish to stay, to notice the world through her eyes. They laughed at their mistakes. In the silences, they simply gazed. Lucas avoided her eyes too long, but when they finally met, it was hard to look away. He wanted to read what she was feeling, to understand why she kept trying with him. Did she see something good in there, under all the cracks? When the music ended, Lucas realized it. Aurora smiled at him differently now. Not that automatic smile, the florist smile for a customer. It was warmer, truer, almost shy. Both a question and a confession at once. They stood there, unmoving. The party spun on around them, but for a second, there was only silence. Aurora tucked her hair behind her ear, bit her lip. He ran a hand behind his neck, looking for courage. No words were needed. So much had already been said in that unlikely touch, that shared laugh, that stumbled step that became a reason to stick together. Things had changed, even if Lucas tried to pretend otherwise. The fear hadn't left, but under his old invisible suit, the urge to stay had started to bloom. To laugh again, to grab her hand one more time. As they strolled home, Aurora mentioned, almost in a whisper, that she couldn't remember the last time someone had danced with her without wanting anything in return. Lucas felt a squeeze in his chest, but didn't answer. He just walked quiet, listening to his own footsteps, realizing that maybe, for the first time in a long while, he wasn't completely alone in this new world. The morning after the Festa Junina, the smell of cornmeal cakes still lingered in the air, together with that lazy Sunday feeling that seemed to blanket the entire village. The sky was gray, the kind of clouds that hide the sun without a hint of rain, just a quiet shadow muting the light. Lucas showed up early, even unannounced, and waited outside the flower shop. He only went in when he heard Aurora humming softly, arranging flowers in tin buckets. He didn't knock. He just entered, hesitant, stomach fluttering with the urge to get close, but not yet sure how. Aurora didn't look up right away. She kept separating the roses, picking them one by one, handling them as gently as someone who knows too well the delicacy of all broken things. Lucas leaned into a corner, silent, almost wishing he could vanish, but after the previous night, he couldn't pretend not to care anymore. The silence between them wasn't heavy, but it wasn't light, either. Hanging in the air, the remnants of a newly born intimacy, the kind of silence where words could come at any moment, but no one knows which one should be first. It was Aurora who finally spoke. "It's funny how the smell of flowers always calms me." She smiled, but only with her mouth. Her eyes didn't join in. She seemed to carry an ancient exhaustion. Some days, it's the only thing that works. Lucas wanted to respond, to say he knew what it was like to need a shelter like that, but his voice wouldn't come out. Instead, he stared at her hands, slender but marked with small scars, old cuts left by life. She noticed his gaze and looked away, murmuring almost an apology for the unplanned confession. "I'm one of those people who talks too much, aren't I?" She tried to joke, but her mouth trembled. Lucas felt her discomfort seep into the room, blending with the scent of honeysuckle and orchids on the counter. And then, as if opening a small window into herself, Aurora went on. "When someone leaves, you start thinking you'll never fit anywhere again." She stopped, took a deep breath. The sound of her breathing seemed heavy, like memories pressing on her chest. "I kept wondering, will I be able to start over? Did they leave any space for me in the world after everything?" Lucas didn't blink. His throat felt dry, his chest tight. It was everything he himself had felt since fleeing Sao Paulo. The fear of never fitting in anywhere, of being left with nothing but the role of an outsider. But he couldn't admit it. He swallowed hard and looked away, pretending interest in a vase of daisies. Even so, Aurora noticed. For a few seconds, there were only small sounds. The rustle of flowers being arranged, a cricket outside, someone's footsteps passing in the street. It was as if the shop was breathing with them. Lucas wanted to ask more, to reach out and embrace the sadness he recognized by its scent, but he only managed to try. He felt it would be intrusive, and maybe it would have been. She kept arranging the flowers, and suddenly let a rose fall to the floor. She moved to pick it up in a quick reflex, but Lucas was faster. Both reached out at the same time, and their fingers touched, just for a moment, but enough for Aurora to pull her hand away as if she'd touched a live wire. Lucas didn't hide it either. He felt a warmth in his wrist, an unexpected shiver. He wanted to apologize, but got stuck in the moment. Their eyes truly met for the first time. No masks, no jokes, no defenses. And there was a silent plea there. "Do you understand me?" that neither dared to say aloud. Lucas held the rose and handed it back, slowly. He noticed how her hands shook just slightly, almost imperceptibly. He wasn't much better himself. He wanted to share his fears, to admit that courage is just a performance we put on when there's no other choice. But instead, he just whispered, "No one ever knows when it's time to start over." Aurora stopped, her gaze on the floor. For a second, he feared he'd made a mistake, that he should have kept quiet. But then she slowly lifted her face, and in her eyes he saw something different. It wasn't sadness, it was recognition. "Sometimes I think that's what life is, trying again, even when you don't feel like it." These words lingered in the air, taking their time to dissipate, like incense smoke in a closed room. Lucas managed a crooked smile, shy and half-practiced, the kind you only give when you can't hide your heart anymore. After that, no one spoke for a while. The shop work resumed, slower, as if everything important had already been said, at least for now. They worked side by side in silence, but it was a full silence, not isolating but connecting. Lucas found himself glancing at Aurora when he thought she wasn't looking, watching the way she bit her lip when concentrating, how she tucked her hair behind her ear. He noticed, as well, how subtly she kept herself from getting too close, as if an invisible field hovered between them, a warning not to break the still fragile trust. Outside, the village was really beginning to wake. Wagon wheels, voices from the bakery, the smell of bread mingling with the flowers. But in there, it was as if time belonged to a different world. Everything suspended, everything gentle. Lucas didn't want to leave. In that tiny, colorful space, he felt a little more whole. He thought of everything he'd lost, the big city, the burden of secrets and threats. And he wondered if he'd ever have the right to allow himself something as simple as this. Company, hot coffee, the sweet scent of flowers, and the hope, even if small, of being truly seen by someone. Aurora was trimming dahlia stems when, for a moment, she paused and looked at him. A long, tender look, full of unspoken questions. Lucas didn't break eye contact. And in that gaze, they both understood what neither could yet say. It lasted only a moment, but it was enough to change the air in the shop. They went back to work in time, but now there was a new feeling between them, a fresh complicity, a beautiful exposed fragility. By accident, they'd both chosen to trust a little more, even with no promises. Just letting, little by little, this strange and sweet feeling grow among old wounds and freshly cut roses. That afternoon, the shop seemed to breathe with the flowers, the sweet scent of jasmine curling quietly into the calm air. Aurora arranged a pot of violets on the counter, repeating the same movement for the 10th time, just so she wouldn't have to think. Outside, the sky was already hinting at day's end, a blue so pale it almost seemed sad, damp and cold. She listened to voices on the street, an occasional tired laugh. Most days, this was the routine. Flowers, silences, rushed customers, a neighbor quietly asking to run a tap. The click of the glass door swinging open was enough to make Aurora stiffen her shoulders. First came that smell of approaching rain, and then the girl entered, skinny, eyes red from crying so much her body seemed exhausted. Bag slung over one side. She stopped in the middle of the store, trapped between running out or begging to stay. Aurora set the pot down. In that instant, her heart tried to leap out of her chest. There was such fragility in that girl, something that reminded her of how she used to feel years before. But Aurora didn't know how to offer comfort without losing herself. Still, she stepped forward, slowly, trying to smile. "Hi, sweetheart, are you okay?" Her tone was sweet, but the girl trembled to hear it. "Are you looking for anything?" The silence between them was so dense you could hear a pin drop. The girl dropped her gaze, curling into her own arms. "I need help, please," she said so softly the words almost dissolved into the scent of flowers. Aurora froze. She wanted to reach out, but an old fear nailed her feet to the ground. The emptiness of her past swept in again, that icy numbness from when nobody listened, when her own cry had been useless. She recognized the absolute terror in the girl's eyes. And suddenly, she realized she was still afraid of dangerous people, still scared that trying to help could get her hurt. Before she could do anything, another voice cut through the silence. Lucas. He was in the storeroom, but he must have heard everything. Or maybe he only sensed it, the way some people can sense things without a word being spoken. He emerged with his shirt sleeves dirty from soil, his face set, his eyes sharp, way too serious for someone claiming to be a newcomer. But Lucas looked at the girl as if he could see past her fear. Aurora tried to speak, but her words stuck. And Lucas, without asking permission, came over to the girl, crouched to her eye level. He didn't touch her. He just stood there, making a safe corner in the world. "Do you want to sit down for a bit?" he asked, voice low, gentle but firm. The girl nodded. Aurora pulled out a chair, hands trembling, and left the two of them there. Time froze between tears and the scent of flowers. Outside, the wind rattled the door, pushing dry leaves across the walkway. The faint tingling of a bell mixed with the girl's heavy breathing. Lucas didn't take his eyes off her face, watchful, protective. Aurora noticed an invisible line drawn there. On one side, the fear that had always told her to stay silent. On the other, the immense urge to help. It wasn't just a wish. It was a need not to repeat old mistakes, not to let another woman suffer in silence as she once had. "Is someone hurting you?" Lucas asked, straight to the point. Simple words, but hearing them spoken, right there in the shop, made Aurora break out in a nervous sweat. She had never heard Lucas talk like that, so firm, almost harsh, but with compassion that sliced the air. The girl bit her lip. Her small hands released her bag. She only cried. He's waiting for me outside. I don't want to go home. I can't." Aurora felt a familiar old rage rising, mixed with pity. She wanted to protect, but her own fear was just as big as the girl's. She stood frozen, fingers digging into the wooden counter. Lucas moved closer. The way he moved was different, like every gesture was carefully measuring danger. "You can trust us," he said. "No one's going to touch you here." Suspicion lingered in the girl's eyes. Aurora could see it took time, but she believed him. Just a little. Enough to not run away. He fetched a glass of water, offering it carefully. Then he pulled his phone from his pocket and fired off a quick message. Aurora noticed that, found it strange. Lucas seemed different, almost professional. Yet, at the same time, there was warmth in his gaze, a silent "I get it." Aurora wondered where that instinct, that certainty came from. She noticed some old ladies peering in through the window. The gossip would soon become rumor. And deep in her chest, she felt a strange pride in the stranger. Lucas was no mere outsider. Here was someone willing to stand up to anything. Time passed slowly. None of the three knew what to expect. Only the clock on the wall ticked, impatient. Aurora felt she was reliving a nightmare, but also realized there was a tiny spark, a hope that nearly turned to tears. Outside, the sky had turned purple. The fear hadn't vanished, but something in Lucas's actions had changed things. When he came back from the phone call, his eyes looked different, as if he was carrying a secret as big as the world. "I called for help," he told the girl. Then he looked at Aurora, steady. "This ends today." The girl sobbed, clinging to her glass. Aurora wanted to run from her own memories, but forced herself to stay at the girl's side. For the first time, she felt the man's presence as a shelter, and, too, as a danger. In the end, it wasn't the words that stayed, it was the silence. And in that silence, Aurora heard, without anyone saying it, that neither she nor Lucas was alone in that fight. That sometimes, courage means someone standing by your side and saying, "I see you." And right there, among flowers crushed on the counter and fear still pulsing in the village walls, Aurora realized what was really being born. Not just trust in Lucas, but the desire to be someone better, for herself, and for whoever might need her. The air smelled of wet earth. Deep down, everyone was expecting the worst. But in that little shop, with a girl crying, protected between two broken lives, a different story began. And no one wanted to go back to silence. The flower shop's doorbell jingled early in the morning, a familiar sound that always seemed to announce a hint of hope. But that day, it sounded different. Aurora felt her stomach twist. She wished it was just another Monday, with the sweet scent of fresh roses and quiet music from the old speakers. But there was something in the air, heavy, like the sky before a storm. The villagers spent the whole weekend whispering. Aurora picked up on the echoes and fragments of conversation on her trips to the corner store. Comments about Lucas's courage, his decisive ways, strange for someone supposedly just passing through. Eyes lingered on her, then quickly turned away. Aurora couldn't stand the pointing anymore. She'd barely slept. Lucas appeared in the doorway, walking slowly, slower than usual. He avoided her gaze as if the floor had suddenly become very interesting. It was pouring outside, and his hair was drenched, dripping onto his worn shirt. Aurora noticed how his shoulders seemed more hunched, and for a second she thought maybe he was just as lost as she was. They traded a nearly whispered, "Good morning," as if they were strangers again. Silence. Only the sound of water flowing in the gutter. Aurora had a strange urge to say anything, but she couldn't. She busied herself with a sunflower arrangement, trimming leaves, pretending focus. Inside, her chest felt tight. Images of the night before kept replaying in her mind. The way he'd known exactly what to say to calm the girl, how he'd held her hands with a steadiness that didn't belong to an ordinary person. It wasn't just kindness, it was knowledge. Experience. The kind you get from having faced this sort of thing before, and worse. Aurora heard Lucas rummaging among the vases, picking up a bucket, his sleeve brushing the counter. Small noises. The colorful shop seemed out of place with the two of them so gray. Outside, the world really was gray, mist, the smell of wet earth. Inside the shop, for the first time, it felt claustrophobic. She tried to convince herself it was fine if he had secrets. Everyone does. But the image of the crying girl and the firmness in Lucas's voice wouldn't leave her. Something didn't add up. Aurora felt her old pride. She'd trusted too much before and been fooled. Now, she had to protect herself. Suddenly, Lucas came to the counter. The distance between them closed in a way that felt uncomfortable. Aurora's hands started to sweat. His scent mixed with the flowers, strong, different from what she was used to. The silence turned heavier. He shook his head, cleared his throat, but didn't speak. She couldn't stand it anymore. Aurora looked straight at him. She thought that somewhere deep in his eyes was an old sadness, an ancient fear, but also something walled off, letting no one in. Lucas. Her voice wavered, but she forced it to sound steady. Who are you, really? He didn't answer, just knit his brow, looking down as if searching for an escape. Aurora felt a chill in her gut. She went on. It's no use telling me you just want a quiet life. I saw how you helped that girl. The right words, the calm. You know a lot more than you pretend. What? Lucas squeezed his eyes shut, as if in pain, ran a hand through his hair, took a deep breath. Aurora noticed bitten nails, a slight tremor at his fingertips. She thought of how many times she'd felt exactly like this, being questioned, without the courage to say everything. Still, she waited. Silence dragged out. Only the rain filled the space. He spoke at last, not looking at her. I can't explain. Not now. His words sounded small, almost inaudible. Bitterness rose in Aurora's mouth. It hurt to hear. She wished the lies had ended. He could have just been another stranger, nothing more. Instead, she was involved. Her chest felt heavy. The urge to run hit hard, but her feet wouldn't move. She tried again. Lucas, do you realize you're putting me in a hard spot? You're not who you say you are. I'm not a fool. I just don't want to get hurt again, or for anyone in the village to end up hurt because of you. A flash of lightning lit up the shop for a moment. Lucas lifted his face, and, for the first time, Aurora saw fear. Not anger, not bravado, just fear. Eyes haunted, the look of someone who's been running too long. She realized, surprised, that she cared too much. Her heart pounded with worry, and with anger at herself, for being someone's hostage again. Lucas hesitated, reached for her arm, then stopped halfway. He shook his head, a gesture of almost defeat, and before she could say anything else, walked to the door, nearly stumbling over his boots. The bell rang again as he left. This time, the sound was harsh, like a slammed door. Aurora closed her eyes for a moment. She stayed there, her back to the window, hugging her own shoulders. The scent of flowers didn't console her. The idea of trusting had become dangerous again. She wanted to close up, go home, forget the day ever happened. But, deep down, the greater pain was realizing how much she cared. Outside, the rain didn't let up. Aurora thought of Lucas, soaked and alone, walking the muddy streets beneath suspicious eyes. She wondered if he'd ever come back, and, more than anything, if she'd be able to let him go, after everything. The first time he accepted the watering can, Aurora thought it odd. She hadn't even asked if he wanted to help. She simply held it out to Lucas, with a tired look, like she didn't have any energy left to question anyone's intentions. He hesitated, stared at that pale green plastic tool for a while, as if he was unconsciously weighing his options. Pretend not to see it, make up an excuse, slip back into the shadows and anonymity of the storeroom. But instead, he took it slowly, just 2 fingers at first, like someone who's never handled anything that might bloom. He stood still, feeling its weight. The smell of damp earth was still new to him. Lucas came from another life, one filled with leather seats, air conditioning, cold coffee, and anxiety pills hidden in an office desk drawer. Now, faced with her and that bed of chrysanthemums, everything moved slow, as if time thickened. Aurora rarely looked directly at him, but she noticed every detail. She saw when he dripped water onto his expensive shoes and didn't complain. She watched his large hand trying to be gentle on the leaves, the tense wrinkle between his brows slowly relaxing. The mornings became more colorful. The doorbell always sounded softly, blending into the distant tolling from the church. People who came into the flower shop said it felt different now. Brighter, lighter. But no one dared give credit to the outsider. Only Aurora saw Lucas relaxing, little by little, learning it takes a special touch to cut a rose. That gardenias don't forgive carelessness. The shop filled with quiet little noises, the snip of scissors, water from the tap, the low laughs Aurora let out, sometimes without even realizing. At first, only silence ruled. Between vases, Lucas kept his words to himself. Sometimes, he felt an urge to ask about her family, her past, her fears. He never found the courage. He preferred to observe Aurora's gestures, her soil-stained fingers, the way she tied her hair back when the shop heated up, how she always paused at the same window to peek outside, as if expecting someone dangerous to return, even if she never said so. And there was her gaze. It wasn't an easy one to decipher. Aurora had her fiery days, when she smiled big and told silly jokes to customers. On those days, Lucas just wanted to lose himself in that uncomplicated laughter, to let himself forget he was a man scarred by the past. But then, sometimes, her laughter would fade without warning. All it took was a loud noise in the street, or an unwelcome question, and she'd retreat inside herself. The silence then grew dense, heavy. He wondered if he'd ever be able to break down that wall, or if he was even brave enough to let anyone see his own hurt on the other side. Aurora watched him too. She'd fix her gaze on Lucas when she thought he didn't notice, with the wary look of someone weighing risks. In silence, she listed everything odd about him. The way he spoke softly on his cell and disappeared if a stranger came in. The way he preferred listening to speaking, always a little on alert, even when trying to relax. Aurora knew all too well the sort of man who keeps secrets. She'd loved and suffered through too many secrets herself. But somehow, Lucas was different. When he made a mistake, he blushed. When he made a dumb joke, he gave a crooked grin. When she got near him, he'd clench his jaw, as if even her touch put him on edge. Customers liked to pretend they didn't see anything. But sly grandmothers traded knowing glances and gossiped in the corner. Aurora pretended not to care. She was tired of running, of hiding. Lucas, for his part, seemed at a loss for what to do with all the attention. In the big city, looks were threats. Here, they were invitations, to cake, to stories, to sweet tea on a neighbor's porch. He turned down every invitation, politely, learning, slowly, that here, to be invisible, you had to try to exist every once in a while. On an ordinary Tuesday, business was slow at lunchtime. Aurora sat among the jasmines, tired, eyes fixed on the ground. Lucas seemed like he wanted to say something, but couldn't. He felt ridiculous. A man once feared in grand courtrooms, now unable to say a gentle word. His chest ached with embarrassment. All at once an almost adolescent shyness was blooming inside him. Next to her, with a shy gesture, he ran his hand through the stems, fingers brushing the delicate skin of the leaves. Aurora noticed. She didn't say anything, but in that small motion she felt. Someone was trying to stay, even not knowing if he'd be accepted. They spent a good few minutes like that, side by side, breathing almost the same longing to be seen. The sound of wind on the roof, the smell of lavender, and a good silence, so different from those of the past. It wasn't empty, it was a promise. For the first time in a long while, Aurora found herself wondering, what if she trusted again? At first, she tried to drive that idea away. But when Lucas looked at her, dark, uncertain eyes meeting hers, she saw no threat. Just someone, as broken as herself, searching for a place to take root without the fear of being pulled up again. The afternoon ended with them laughing over a broken vase. Nothing dramatic, just a silly accident. He knocked it over, tried too late to save it, failed, and nearly apologized like a kid. Aurora couldn't help it. She laughed out loud, louder than she had and she didn't even know how long. Lucas thought she was laughing at him, but soon realized she was laughing with him. A laugh of relief. And in all that simplicity, something started to grow, so quietly no one even noticed. Every watered plant, every stifled smile, every respected silence was a root. The past was still there, throbbing, still sore. The scars hadn't vanished. They were just learning to coexist with the light that was, quietly, beginning to seep in through the windows. And that day, in that flower shop, neither knew it yet, but they were already planting a new beginning together. Winter's not usually harsh in the village, but that morning there was something off in the air. The sky was low, faded, a gunmetal gray that made everything quieter. Lucas woke before sunrise. The clock barely read just past 6 when they heard the engine. Unlike the usual rattle of the village cars, it was a low, muffled rumble from another world. A black car, shining as if just out of a luxury showroom, so out of place next to all the red-dusted pickups and the boys' battered motorcycles. No one came through town unnoticed. The baker, always sweeping his walk at the same time, looked up suspiciously, almost holding his breath as the car crept up the main street. Lucas didn't need to see it. He felt it. Inside, a nearly uncontrollable urge to shrink, to disappear again. At the flower shop, Aurora liked to open before the day began in earnest. She always said the plants woke up better with the fresh air. The store was as colorful as ever, but that morning a cold wind curled in under the door. Her stomach was uneasy, as if invisible signals were drifting across the street, slipping in through the door. Lucas drank his coffee in a corner of the little kitchen, hands clamped tight around the mug. It wasn't hot enough to thaw what he felt inside. The phone rang. The sharp sound cut through the quiet like a punch. He looked at the screen, an unknown number. Eyes narrowed, gut roiled. He already knew nothing good was coming. Hello. Nothing but breathing, heavy, slow. The silence between words carried something sinister. Then a voice, cold and deep, each word biting. I thought you got the message. We won't warn you again. If you or anyone there show up in the news, there'll be nothing left to bury. It was quick, barely a whisper. The call ended before Lucas could say anything. It felt like the whole house had been shaken. Outwardly, nothing had happened. Inside, everything was falling apart. He stood there for a long time, his knuckles white. The phone on the counter seemed to threaten him just by being there. Fear came with that old guilt. How many people have I already dragged into the shadows of this world, he thought. And now Aurora. In the shop, she felt his absence like a cold draft. It wasn't just the wind sneaking in, it was something deeper. She kept wondering why Lucas hadn't shown up early, the way he had for days. She tried to be rational. Maybe he had the flu, maybe he was just tired. But the emptiness in the shop was obvious. It was as if something was missing, a color, a scent, a sound. When he finally showed up, nearly lunchtime, he looked smaller somehow. Slumped shoulders, hollow eyes, those dark circles of someone who's been up all night. He barely glanced at her. He walked straight to the back, made up a quick conversation with Mrs. Lourdes about a delivery of flower pots. Aurora watched every detail, searching for signs. She felt that old, anxious knot in her stomach, almost like a warning. She tried to make small talk about a new arrangement she was working on. Lucas just responded with a gesture, a faint smile, eyes darting away. In that moment, she realized he was somewhere far away, more than ever before. It was the silence between them that screamed. The silence of someone clutching a truth to his chest, but not daring to let it out. She tried not to take it personally, but that was hard. Her head started spinning stories, hearing old voices. You're not enough. No one stays long by your side. Better brace yourself for loneliness. Her past, that suffocating marriage, flooded her mind with fears. It was the same feeling as always walking on eggshells. Lucas avoided her, passing by as if she were a stranger. He didn't touch the plants next to her anymore, didn't laugh at her jokes, didn't meet her seeking glance. Aurora even missed the annoyance he used to show. It was a kind of closeness. Now, not even that. To an outsider, it was just awkwardness, a subtle drifting apart. But inside, it hurt. It hurt him, fearing he'd drag her somewhere dark. It hurt her, terrified of reliving abandonment, afraid she wasn't worthy of being trusted again. At the end of the day, a storm broke out suddenly, as if the sky wanted to wash away all that tension. The flower shop emptied out. Only the flowers remained, and Aurora, perched on a stool, watching the sky grow darker outside. She kept asking herself, did I mess up? Did I put too much hope in this? It can't be that all the good between us vanished overnight. From a distance, Lucas watched the shop, the yellowish light spilling out from under the door. His heart clenched with every clap of thunder. He wanted to rush over there, apologize, explain everything. But the thought echoed in his mind. If we stay together, she's going to get hurt, and it'll be my fault. I need to keep her away. That's what screamed inside him. And the fear, his old companion, won every time. Aurora already knew that feeling. Abandonment wasn't new. But with Lucas, it hurt differently, because he was the first, in a long time, that made her believe she could trust again. For hours, the village was steeped in a mix of rain, silence, and trembling lights in windows. In Lucas's house, the phone tossed on the table seemed to weigh a ton. He stared into space, listening to the rare passing cars, straining his ears for any odd noise. In the darkness, each of them felt their loneliness in their own way. Lucas, convincing himself it was best to push away everything he loved. Aurora, wondering if love was always like this. A risk, a tightrope walk, waiting without guarantees. There, between thin walls, thunder, and insecurities, their pasts circled slowly, reminding them that maybe trusting and starting over cost more than anyone is willing to pay. The night felt bigger than usual in that forgotten village. Heavy, icy rain hammered the roof, with the wind making tired groans, whistling through window cracks. Lucas felt a pang in his chest as he turned off the house lights one by one, leaving the living room almost in the dark. He was tired. Not just physically, after a hard day. It was something else, like every memory inside him weighed a ton. He looked at the table and saw the folded letter, edges rumpled from being squeezed between his fingers. It had been almost 40 minutes since he'd written it. An apology disguised as an explanation. He tried putting everything in there, everything Aurora deserved to know, but it was impossible. How do you fit into a letter the feeling of losing the one who understands you most? How do you write you're leaving just to avoid hurting her? He wanted to write something beautiful, something worthy of their story, but no words came. Only fear. It was past 10 when thunder made the windows rattle. Outside, the storm seemed ready to sweep the whole village off the map. And on that corner in Minas, Lucas's windows were the only ones still lit. He sat on the couch, letter in hand, staring at the wall. He thought about everything he wanted to forget, the courtroom, the threats, the life he'd buried in Sao Paulo. In that village, he wasn't a lawyer, wasn't a hero, nothing, just a tired man wanting to disappear. But truth was, he couldn't stop thinking about her. On the other side of the silence, Aurora felt this distance as a deep ache, not just from him, but from everything she'd ever left behind. At first, Lucas had just been another stranger, someone everyone's suspicious of. But then, he became something else. The little gestures. A cup washed without being asked. The way he'd fixed the display flowers, pretending not to know a thing about lilies or chrysanthemums. She'd seen sadness in his eyes, and, for a while, thought she could help. But now, it was like talking to a cold wall. The storm intensified. Anyone who's lived in the countryside knows. On nights like that, the streets are empty, neighbors vanished, just darkness and the clamor of wild grass in the wind. Aurora didn't hesitate. She grabbed an old raincoat, pulled on her boots, and headed to his house. She felt the mud sticking to the path, the wind trying to turn her umbrella inside out. Everything in her screamed it was a terrible decision. But something bigger pushed her on, that fear of losing again, of not asking while there was still time for an answer. When Aurora knocked on the door, Lucas jumped. His heart lurched, and he thought about not answering. He stood still, hoping the silence would drive her off. But her voice cut through the wood, shaky but strong. "Lucas, I know you're in there. Don't do this." He leaned his forehead against the door. The silence grew so tense you could almost hear their thoughts. He wanted her to leave so badly, and at the same time, wished she'd never walk away. When he opened up, he did it slowly, as if every inch of the doorknob stole borrowed time. Her eyes were wet. It was impossible to tell if it was rain or something else. Her hair was hastily pulled back, her hands trembling, angry and cold at once. She didn't come inside, just stood and stared at him. A chilly breeze passed between them, carrying the scent of wet earth, filled with memories, abandonment, unspoken promises. "Aren't you going to say anything? Are you running out on me too?" Her voice was soft, a little tired. Lucas tried, but his throat closed. He could only gesture, as if asking for patience, but even that fell flat. The silence was heavy. He could see her breathing fast, so tense, hands clenched. She was waiting for an answer, anything, as long as it was true. I have to leave, Aurora." That was all. And it hurt more than anything he'd faced in the courtroom. The word leave filled all the space around them. "Are you even going to explain? Or are you just going to walk away and leave me in the dark again?" There was no shouting, no drama. Just the raw sadness that settles in when you're too tired for anything else. Lucas picked up the letter, hesitated. Another sharp silence. She noticed the paper and understood everything. In his eyes, she saw fear wide open. It wasn't just for himself. They stood like that for a while, looking at each other. In his mind flashed images without sound. Aurora smiling behind flowers. Aurora standing up for a client. Aurora crying in anger at the world. He thought he cared about her more than his own skin. But he also knew. People who stayed close to him ended up burned. He was afraid he'd drag her down too. When he finally spoke, the storm outside crashed so loud it almost knocked the power out. He breathed deeply, catching the scent of pressed flowers on her coat. And, unable to fully meet her gaze, he let it out, like ripping out something inside him. My name's not Daniel. I'm Lucas Moreira. I used to be a lawyer in Sao Paulo. I did the right thing, but messed with the wrong people. That's why I'm here, hiding. They found me, Aurora. I thought leaving would protect you. But I don't want to hurt you. I don't want to lose you. With every word, her face changed. Shock, sorrow, anger, all at once. But she never broke eye contact. A flash of lightning briefly lit their faces. Aurora let her hand relax, and in her palm were crumpled petals she didn't even remember bringing. She stood there a few seconds, just breathing. She was mad, scared, but seemed more relieved than she expected. Thank you for telling me the truth. That was all. No scene, no pretty speech. She just stood there, dripping rain, looking straight at him, lips trembling with nerves, but also with the longing to be held again. The silence shifted, almost an unspoken apology, almost an invitation, to choose, together, if it was better to run from this storm or face it side by side. Outside, the rain kept pouring. Inside the house, the fear was still there, but now it had a name, a face. And, for the first time, it seemed just a little bit smaller. It hardly felt like the same place. The village lost its usual calm. There was a crack in the air, a tension, as if the wind itself knew a secret. Outside, heavy clouds held back the rain. But among these simple houses, it was fear that really weighed everything down. It was strange to think that just the day before everything was routine again. The smell of fresh coffee on the sidewalks, the sound of children running across the square, Aurora arranging flowers at the counter, lost in the colors while Lucas hurried by, pretending not to notice her. Now, he felt every beat of his heart echo in his bones. Aurora was beside him, paler than usual, but with her chin raised. Her eyes never blinked. He realized it was anger, but also courage. She was shaking, and not even trying to hide it. But retreating just wasn't her way. Once all the secrets came out, him, the fugitive lawyer, her, the woman who always chose to believe in others but wished she never had to trust again. It seemed everything could end one of two ways, alone, each saved in their own way, or together against whatever came. Aurora made her choice. For herself, for him. Lucas wanted to run. He'd planned it for years. The bags, the fake name, always thinking 10 steps ahead, changing cities, face, voice. But standing in front of her, right then, all he wanted was to stay. The most surprising thing was realizing that courage wasn't about shouting in a courtroom. Real courage was accepting the choice to stay. That was what she was waiting for. When the men arrived, nobody had to say a word. Everyone just felt it. 2 black cars, inching along. They didn't fit in, and probably didn't care to. They strode toward the square, eyeing the houses, asking questions. Under their jackets, something sharper, the outline of a weapon, or just sheer malice. Aurora pressed her cold hand to Lucas's arm. Her fingers shook. That touch said more than any words. Fear, yes. But she would stay. There was no turning back. And in the silence between them, Lucas realized she was putting her life in his hands. For the first time, he felt what it really meant to matter to someone. In the flower shop, neighbors whispered. Mrs. Lourdes shut her gate early. The baker crossed the street without looking back. No sound but wind rattling the signboards, the scrape of rusty gates, shoes on gravel. And that silence, the kind that screams louder than any siren. Lucas knew he couldn't face this alone. He was so scared he wanted to vomit. But it wasn't about him. He looked at Aurora as if to say, without words, I'm sorry if it's not enough, but I'm done running. She understood. Sometimes, you just know by looking. She took charge, went from house to house, acting calmer than she felt, smiling, lying, asking for help, but every word a plea for rescue. Some men from the village, suspicious, headed for the square. Just a few of them, faces worn by hard work. But they showed up, together. For a second, Lucas felt his whole past coming home with the fear. Court corridors, screams, threats, promises of revenge. He'd been running so long, he forgot what it meant to fight. Aurora stood by him, steady, swallowing fear, but not backing down. She whispered a practical order. If it's now, it's together, Lucas. You're not leaving me. No sweetness to her tone. It wasn't tenderness. It was command. A request that would brook no answer. In the dark at the back of the shop, Lucas watched her bent over boxes, hiding letters, organizing phones for emergencies. The strong whiff of pollen felt almost like a hug, yet the air was heavy. He thought he didn't deserve that trust. He remembered the goodbye letter he never gave her. Her face, her grip on the keys, ready to strike or to defend. Everything felt so small in there, but so huge at the same time. Fear sent sweats down his back, made his hand tremble when, on instinct, he reached and took hers. Aurora glanced down at their hands, at him, and took a deep breath. They didn't really know what to do. No one is ready for a fight like this. All they knew was that together, maybe, they had a shot. Outside, the rain had started to fall lightly, as if sadness itself cried for them. Some customers from the shop huddled under the awning, whispering, eyes wide. Lucas felt every stare, felt shame, felt the urge to withdraw, but held Aurora's hand tight. That touch said it all. Don't let go. The armed men demanded answers. Silence in the village was terrifying. No one gave anything away. Through the back window, Aurora saw the face of a little girl, the seamstress's daughter, peeking in, terrified. Lucas wanted to protect her too, protect everyone, as if he could undo the past. Then the shouting started. Confusion, people slamming doors. One of the men tried to force the shop's door, slamming his shoulder into it. Aurora blocked the way. Lucas fought to breathe. But in her eyes, he saw that no matter how scared she was, she didn't know how to run anymore. She'd already taken too many beatings from life, already survived other monsters. Everything happened so fast, a fist on the door, glass rattling, Lucas stepping up beside her, no armor now, just courage. For a few seconds, they listened to their own breathing, believing maybe it wouldn't be enough, but at least, together, they weren't alone. In the end, it was that silent courage that kept everything standing. Lucas spoke in a soft voice, explained the danger, asked for help, organized safe spots. For the first time, the village set aside its mistrust and believed in him. Aurora looked at their neighbors' faces, in the dark and rain, deciding that this house, this life, was worth the fight. The fear didn't disappear, just moved to a different spot. They trembled, but didn't retreat. They discovered that sometimes, facing things doesn't mean being brave all the time. It just means not letting go of the hand life put in yours. And in the heart of the storm, Lucas realized if they made it through that night, maybe he'd never have to run again. The silence between them shifted. Now, it was hope. And for the first time, Lucas let Aurora see who he really was. Fragile, exhausted, determined to fight, not for justice, not for the law, but for her. Morning light poured through the window, gentle now, nothing like last night's crossfire of emotions. The world felt suspended after so much upheaval, as if the whole village was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Lucas stood in the middle of Aurora's kitchen, the smell of fresh coffee and flowers in the air. He had no idea what to do with his hands. He wanted to thank her, to apologize, to explain, to run away. But all he could do was be silent. The air between them grew thick, heavy as a storm cloud. Outside, the wind rattled, a few dry leaves scraping across the yard. Across from him, Aurora stirred a spoon in her mug without looking at him, forehead pressed gently to the window, eyes nearly shut. Her face was swollen, her eyes red but calm. She was no longer a woman hiding pain behind smiles, just Aurora, heartsore and real. He wanted to say her name, quietly asked if she'd slept. She nodded, not lifting her head from the glass. But soon enough he noticed, in the way she breathed deep, her thoughts were somewhere far away. Maybe reliving her own past, maybe weighing what forgiveness meant. Lucas sat down slowly, dragging the chair along, feeling clumsy, out of place. And for the first time in months, he realized he felt shame. He wasn't just the sharp, rational, unbeatable lawyer anymore. He was exposed, fragile, shaking. A stranger full of secrets. Time froze between them. He thought about all the times he fled hard conversations, dodged his own mistakes, ran from fear, and now there was no avoiding it. In the background, the kitchen clock ticked, each second nudging the confession closer. I was scared, he rasped, voice rough. Scared to die, to mess up, scared you'd get hurt because of me. I brought danger here. She turned slowly, watching him. Her eyes were somber and sad, but there was no blame left. Just a silent question. And now, Lucas? He dropped his gaze. The spoon in her hand trembled a little, but she stayed, standing her ground. The words caught in his throat. I don't even know who I am anymore after all this. I spent years fighting for justice, but now I don't know if I deserve to be forgiven. Not by this town. Not by you. Aurora tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, drew a breath, looking into her cup like she might find courage at the bottom of it. Do you really think, her voice barely more than a whisper, that courage means never being scared? Or never making mistakes? Because I always thought being strong was carrying on, even when it hurts. She stood up, leaned against the kitchen sink. Sunlight hit her shoulder, sculpting her face marked by everything she'd survived. Lucas looked at her fingers, nicked with tiny thorn scars, chipped nail polish. Gentleness and toughness in the same hands. Lucas, I spent so long trapped by what others did to me, all the bad choices. She paused, voice unsteady. I got used to feeling ashamed of myself, thinking everything would always go wrong. That I didn't deserve anything good anymore. He felt a strange ache. He wanted to reach for her hand, but didn't dare. His own body felt like fence wires, keeping the two of them apart in the cruelest way. The silence crept back, still heavy, but now changed. It was as if a secret space opened between them where their confessions could finally rest. Yesterday, she went on, her smile small and wet with tears. I didn't stop to think if I deserved to risk it all again. I just thought about you. How unfair it is, judging you for being afraid. I'm scared, too, Lucas. It's just that. She blinked, eyes shining. We don't have to carry everything alone, all the time. The air felt lighter, as if the walls themselves exhaled with relief. Lucas closed his eyes, choked back a sob. For the first time, he let the tears fall. Aurora sat down next to him, so near, but not touching his hand, yet. He spoke low, stumbling. I have so many regrets, Aurora. So much I do differently. I feel like I still owe the whole world an apology. She gave a sad smile, wiped her eyes. Maybe we never pay it all off. Me neither. But one thing I learned, the hardest forgiveness to ask is from ourselves. If you can't forgive yourself, it turns into a prison in here. That's when she took his hand. Just that. But every distance, every fear seemed to fall away between their fingers. Her hand was warm, soft, and strong. Words fell away. All that was left was the way they let themselves, finally, look at each other, stripped of secrets, without armor. Lucas looked at her like a man seeing hope for the first time after long darkness. Aurora closed her eyes and leaned in, as if letting herself rest for just a moment, safe against him. Outside, a little bird split the silence with a shy chirp, as if announcing a new beginning. Between the tears, almost smiles broke through, like people laughing upon finding their way home again. Lucas promised, so soft it was almost inaudible, that he wouldn't run anymore. Not from the town, not from himself. And Aurora, with all the courage she thought she lacked, whispered she wanted to try believing again, in themselves, in life, in tomorrow. The rest was just the sound of the wind, a shy touch, and a quiet understanding that neither of them was alone in their own story anymore. There, in the warmth of the kitchen, forgiveness took shape. And the future, which had always been just a threat, started to feel possible. The sky still looked heavy. Clouds skittered low, thick with the leftovers of a storm that had passed but hadn't really gone. The village was silent that morning, like everyone had forgotten how to speak up, like the danger might return if anyone breathed too loud. Lucas woke to that silence. He took a while to move, not even daring to glance at the window, as if seeing the street would remind him of the doubt still lodged in his chest. Now that everything was out, the secrets gone, he didn't know where to go next. He wasn't even sure a path existed. The scent of damp earth swirled through that simple house where he had out. His shirt, rumpled, mingled with the fragrance of dried flowers Aurora had left in a little vase, just to see if he'd like them. Something silly, maybe, but small gestures like that felt like an anchor in these moments. But he didn't feel anchored. Stay? Leave? Wait for another decision to come from outside or invent a different kind of freedom here, with her? The thoughts leapt around in his mind. He scratched his scruffy chin, feeling every tired piece of his own face. The village routine started slowly. From where he sat, he could hear the distant creak of a cart, the snap of wood from the bakery on the corner. So much small life happening, a whole world outside, while he fought his own war inside. Then he noticed the scent of flowers had faded almost completely and thought of Aurora's shop. No one had really come in for 2 days. The last trouble, people's fear, all of it lingered. Would she open again? Had her flowers survived last night's gale? He pictured Aurora alone, wrapping her apron around her waist, staring at the toppled pots on the floor, trying to rescue whatever was left. That was the way she did everything, never let a single petal die without a fight. Lucas forced himself out the door, lacing his shoes slowly, breathing deep before crossing the threshold. The air outside was colder, but no longer hurt the way it had. In the square, Not much had changed, except people's looks still weighed on him. A jumble of respect, mistrust, fear, hope. He pretended not to notice, but wore those stares like a jacket too tight. He turned the corner and saw Aurora already hunched over her counter, hands dirty with soil, nails trimmed short. The shop itself looked like it had wept through the storm. Broken pots, leaves scattered on the floor, little color left. But not Aurora, she was glowing. Her hair, pinned up messily, had wisps of gold curling loose around her face. There was dirt even up near her cheekbone, and a distracted, radiant smile as she pushed at the earth with her hands. He hardly had the nerve to interrupt, he just stood there, watching. She was beautiful, in that odd way of someone not trying to look beautiful for anyone. Aurora noticed Lucas standing in the doorway. She said nothing for a long moment, just looked up and met his eyes. The silence here was its own thing. It didn't have the weight of judgment, or of anything that needed saying just because it had to be said. It was simply quiet, maybe comfortable, because it hurt a little less than hope. She returned a small, shy smile, a hint of nerves behind it. "Don't mind me. I think the flowers took more of a beating than we did in this mess," she joked, trying to lighten up what was still laced with fear. Lucas felt an odd warmth in his chest. He wanted to tell her she was one of the flowers too, that she'd been battered but was still there, standing, but the words got stuck. He just turned his face away, scratched his neck, searching for courage. It was Aurora who insisted, as always. She picked up a fallen pot and handed it to him. "Give me a hand? You don't need to know about flowers, just about patience. Looks like we'll need to plant everything all over again." Lucas swallowed hard and took the pot. The brush of her fingers on his was brief, but it lingered. He really didn't know a thing about planting. It was true. He'd spent his life rooting out weeds in the courthouse, never putting anything beautiful into the world. But he sat down on the ground beside her, felt the cool earth in his hands, and for the first time in a long while, it felt right. While Aurora sorted through the rescued seedlings, he watched the way she focused, biting her lip gently, blowing a stubborn strand of hair away from her forehead. She didn't speak much, only what was needed, but every now and then she glanced at him sideways, as if to make sure she wasn't alone in this task. Lucas thought about her courage, the bravery to stay, not to give up on people or herself, even after everything. He felt a strange pang, regret. Maybe, for all the time he'd spent doubting any kind of affection, embracing a future made up only of walls. There, on that cold ground, planting again, he realized he was learning how to wait. That the right things don't work out overnight, much like the flowers that only bloom after plenty of rain, lots of persistence, and a bit of luck. Aurora handed him a seedling, her fingers touching his on purpose this time. "These are tough. They don't give up easy." The silence between them grew fuller, almost electric. Lucas wanted to say something about being afraid to stay, about not knowing if he'd be accepted, or if he'd still have to run. He thought about trying, but just looked at her, deeply, hoping his eyes would explain the whole storm. In Aurora's face, Lucas saw a quiet hope. She squeezed her muddy hand around his a few seconds longer than necessary. They didn't promise anything with fancy words. Just gestures, sharing the weight of a pot, blowing dust from a flower bud still closed. That was how you began again. When they finished, the fresh smell of earth mingled with the scent of the first saved blossoms, and the silence lost its fear, it became shelter. Lucas realized he didn't need to know everything about the future. That maybe starting over was just this, planting without knowing what would grow, and caring for it anyway, waiting, believing. That morning, between the mud and the silence, Lucas understood he wasn't alone. For the first time, he thought maybe he could put down roots here, with Aurora. One flower at a time. Life in Morante das Montañas breathed easy again after the storm. This time, though, it was a different kind of silence, not the heavy one that presses fear against your chest, but a peaceful one, the kind you feel when you can open the window freely, breathe deep, and take in the smell of damp earth mixed with Aurora's shop full of flowers. I remember well the morning everything truly changed. Lucas woke up early, earlier than he used to. His face was still creased by the pillow, his eyes a mix of relief and uncertainty. For a moment he sat on the edge of the bed, bare feet pressed to the cold wooden floor, looking around as if trying to convince himself it was all real. The dangers of the past always seem so close, even when the world is finally safe. He rose slowly, crossing the room lit by a wedge of sunlight breaking through the curtains. The smell of fresh coffee from Aurora's kitchen reached him there. It was both invitation and comfort. Downstairs, Aurora was already in her flowered apron, her hair pinned up the way she does when she wants her face clear and free. It was beautiful to see that lightness return to her. Not completely, not as if nothing had happened. No one's scars disappear just like that. But there was a different brightness in her eyes. It was life, once again. Lucas stood at the doorway, just watching. He felt a strange warmth in his chest, that sense of being part of a beautiful scene, even without being sure he deserved to be there. They said good morning in few words. That was all they needed. The silence between them already held so much: respect, care, doubt still present, but also the courage to keep going side by side. Lucas noticed how Aurora traced her finger along the rim of her cup, as if putting off a question. He wanted to say everything, to blurt out, with all the words, that he wanted to stay, that he didn't want to run anymore. But his voice was lodged in his throat, after years of defending himself from the world. As they drank their coffee, Lucas noticed her hands, not just the usual lines, but the small cuts that only someone who works with plants each day has. That reality hurt, somehow. He no longer had the elegance of glass-walled offices in Sao Paulo, the unshakable bearing of the courtroom. He had calluses now, too, from days helping in the shop. He learned the flower names, knew how to separate delicate cuttings, and even risked smiles at the neighbors. It was a different skin, a different life. Later, Aurora looked at him, meeting his gaze. "We're celebrating today?" she asked, a trace of fear hidden behind the smile. Lucas swallowed hard and nodded. Her fear was of letting herself be happy again, of celebrating something and then losing it. He knew exactly how that felt. But he answered yes, with a calmness he hadn't expected to find. In the shop, the crowd grew. Friends from the village began arriving, each one bringing something: simple cakes, warm bread, a pot of daisies, even some live music played by Aurora's nephew, the kind of improvised, affectionate gathering only small towns know. Lucas helped hang a handmade banner that read, "Welcome to your new roots." He got the knot wrong a few times, left the sign a bit crooked, but no one cared. Aurora laughed softly, fixed it with him. In that moment, with their eyes meeting, it all was said without a word. He realized this was the life he wanted from now on. There was a moment when Lucas found himself alone, leaning against the counter, just watching it all. He saw Aurora laughing loudly with Dona Nide, watched the frenzy of children running among the flower pots, heard the clinking of glasses. The smell of cheese bread and fresh flowers was impossible to describe. The past, suddenly, felt like nothing but an old black and white film, far from this explosion of color and sound. There, no one knew his real last name, his big triumphs, or his deepest fears, but somehow he'd already found his tribe, his chosen family. Aurora called Lucas over to the circle. He was a bit awkward, the discomfort of someone not born for parties, but he went all the same. She took his hand, fingers intertwining with gentle firmness. Her touch was warm, strong, so present it made Lucas wish he could hold on forever. The villagers cheered when the two of them made a toast with orange juice in a chipped glass. Aurora said, "Nobody grows alone here." And everyone smiled. Lucas's chest opened up, in that good, aching way. It wasn't easy, accepting affection, trust, belonging, but he was learning, right then, in that very minute. After the party, with petals scattered across the floor, Lucas and Aurora were alone among the still messy pots. He spoke, finally, unafraid. "I want to stay. I don't want to run anymore. This is my place, if you want me here." Aurora didn't reply right away. She just cupped his face in her hands and pressed her forehead to his. They closed their eyes, breathing together, listening only to the sound of their hearts and the world outside settling down. Her answer came as a light smile, a joyful tear rolling down, and a long, quiet kiss, the kind that doesn't need any explanation. Lucas breathed in the scent of flowers mixed with her hair. For the first time, he didn't think about what could go wrong. He only wanted that moment, that smell, that feeling of home. When he opened his eyes again, Aurora was already reaching for the hoe, laughing. "Tomorrow you'll help me plant the new seedlings, doctor?" This time he answered without hesitation, "Tomorrow and every day you want me to." Right there in the middle of the party's mess, they hugged, and it felt like at last, life had found fertile ground to start over. The day began quietly, a bit shy. You could feel a lightness in the air, the scent of damp soil mixed with flowers, the kind of silence you only find in a small town after a night's rain. Aurora's shop was filled with color, but it was in the back, away from the street and the noise, that life was truly changing. Lucas was there, standing a little ways from the door, watching her. He still didn't seem to quite believe he was really there. His look carried a soft surprise, as if the world had finally shed its weight. It was strange, because for so long, all he'd seen was a world of battle, duty, trouble. But with Aurora, things felt simple. They felt light. Aurora moved among the pots with that distracted delicacy of someone who loves what they do. Her hair was pinned up any old way with a clip, a strand falling across her face. Every now and then she looked back, over her shoulder, just to check that Lucas was still there. There was care and fear mixed in her gaze. You could see it in the way she ran her hand over the soil, almost as if whispering to the past for permission to begin again. No one said anything for a few minutes. They just listened to the birds, and now and then, the laughter of a child playing somewhere nearby. A gentle breeze slipped in among the flowers, and the leaves made a quiet sound, almost a whisper. Lucas took the seedling they'd set aside, a tiny purple ipe, fragile but full of promise. He looked at the plant, then at Aurora. He hesitated a moment. His fingers squeezed the pot tighter than necessary, his mouth opened to say something and closed again. She noticed, smiled, and came closer, nice and slow. Her steps barely made a sound on the earth. When she was next to him, they didn't say a word. He handed her the pot, a little awkwardly. Aurora touched his fingertips, and just for an instant, it was hard to breathe. It was a simple touch, but it carried so much history. Past, fear, longing, hope, all that mess that, for the first time, could turn into something else. She looked deep into Lucas's eyes, as if to ask if he was really ready for this. And he fought inside against 1,000 old voices telling him to run. But he didn't. There was only silence, but a good kind, a silence that hugged you. The ground was soft, easy to dig. They both knelt side by side, their pants getting stained with soil, and started to make a hole. Every time their fingers met, even by accident, they both felt a flutter in their stomachs. Aurora closed her eyes for a second, just breathing in the earth, maybe remembering how many times she'd cried in that same backyard when no one was around. Lucas noticed, and for a moment, wanted to hold her hand and never let go. But he didn't. Not yet. Instead, he tossed another handful of soil into the hole, slowly, the way you build something up, not bury it. When the seedling went into the earth, Aurora gently took care of the roots. Lucas just watched, a small smile slipping out before he could hide it. He looked moved, though he tried not to show it. The sun broke through the clouds, lighting up their faces. At that moment, Lucas looked at Aurora and thought, "This is all I want. A simple reason to stay. A home with no luxuries, no secrets." They finished planting together. Aurora looked at the ipe and took a deep breath, as if washing away some old hurt right then and there. Lucas put his hand on her shoulder, gently, still a little shy but steady. She rested her head on his arm, just for a moment. It was brief, but enough to soothe everything inside. Nothing was said, but it was all there, in their bodies, in the smell of the earth, in the warmth of the touch. Between the silence and the distant sounds of the little town, there was a promise hanging in the air. The promise of those who suffered, but still believe. Lucas's mouth opened before he even thought about it. "Do you think it'll bloom?" he asked softly, almost apologetically. Aurora smiled back, a different smile, one so full of certainty he'd never seen in anyone else. "If we take care of it, it'll bloom. Even after the worst storms." He wanted to say he was afraid, wanted to confess that keeping secrets still squeezed his chest sometimes. But he didn't have to. Aurora gave his hand a gentle squeeze, and in that gesture, he knew he could rest. For the first time, he didn't feel like running. It was as if the home he'd always looked for was here, rooted in the Minas soil and in her quiet care. A dog barked somewhere far away, a bell tolled in the village, calling people to mass, little things, giving a sense of everyday life. For the first time, Lucas thought he wanted to stay. Not just that morning, not just for a while. To really stay, to grow old together, to watch the flowers grow and the seasons change. Aurora began talking about pruning the branches, about tending the roots, about what color the ipe would show when its time came. He listened to each word, but his eyes were on her mouth, the way her fidgety hands always returned to the earth, as if every gesture said, "I'm here." He wanted to kiss her, right there, but held back. Instead, he pulled her close for a tight embrace, the kind that fits you perfectly, that says everything with no need for promises. Aurora melted, silent, hot tears streaming down her cheeks. He noticed, but didn't ask. The only thing he did was keep holding her, running his hand gently along her back, taking in the smell of flowers, of earth, of now. The ipe stayed planted, quiet but immense. Still almost nothing, a small thing, but for the two of them, it was everything. In that corner of the world, Lucas finally understood. Home isn't a place, it isn't walls. It's whoever holds you when fear comes knocking. Aurora, with all her pain and all her color, was the ground where he could bloom. The morning rolled on, peaceful. The town sound started up, distant voices, the smell of coffee drifting in from across the street. Lucas looked at Aurora and thought only, here, with you. And he stayed.